Here's something that took me a long time to admit about myself. I stop most things at 95%. Not every project, but enough that the pattern is undeniable. Right at that point where something's almost done, almost complete, almost real, almost out in the world, and I stop. Just quietly not finish it. And I created beautiful stories about why that made complete sense to me. But here's what was actually happening. If it's not finished, nobody can judge it. Nobody can tell me it failed. Nobody can look at the complete thing and find any mistakes or what's lacking in it. Right? There's a real sense of safety in that almost. As soon as something is complete, it carries accountability. Completion means it's real, and real things can be criticized. So I kept most things at 95%, and I kept calling it something else. So I want to show you what I found underneath that pattern and how to shift it. Because I'd be willing to bet you have your own version of this. Yeah, maybe not 95%. Maybe yours shows up every time money starts to feel stable and something in you finds a way to pull it back. Maybe it shows up every time a relationship gets real and something in you starts creating distance. Whatever the loop is, whatever face it's wearing right now, this applies to any pattern you keep running. And what I found is that there's really only three things that interrupt a pattern at the level where it actually lives. By the end of this episode, you'll have all three. But to understand what they are and why they work, I need to take you back to before I had any of this to work with. Before the framework, before the language, before any of this made sense. Because the first time I experienced one of these keys, it wasn't in a workshop or a book. I was having this recurring dream, night after night. And what bothered me most wasn't the content of it. It was how powerless I felt inside the dream. So there's this house, and inside the house it was weird. I could only describe it as something evil, pure evil. And it wasn't a person, it was something older than that. And I'd get to the house night after night, and it would start coming for me. And at that point, I would just automatically wake up. And this went on long enough that it actually started to bleed into my day-to-day life. And then one night, something shifted. Yeah, I was still inside the dream, and I just knew this is my dream, which meant I could change the rules. So I reached into my pocket, I pulled out a gun, and I just ended it. And the dream never came back. So what stayed with me wasn't the relief, right? It wasn't what actually happened or how I solved it. But what it did do is it ended months of the same nightmare, the same powerlessness, the same result. And then one moment of awareness and it was gone. So it wasn't because I was stronger or braver, but really it came down to I just knew where I was. And I've thought about that moment a lot since, because that feeling, being powerless inside something, that is actually mine. That didn't just live in my dreams. There's a line in chapter 1 that I've come back to more times than I can count. And I want to read it to you because I don't think I can say it better than how I wrote it. In many ancient systems, the soul is not separate from your life. It is the dreamer, the weaver of form, the force beneath the fabric. You're not a body with a consciousness. You are consciousness having a momentary experience of being this body. So sit with that for a second, because if that's true, and I believe it is, then the patterns you're running aren't who you are. They're what you carried in, reinforced in childhood, yeah, more than likely, but originating from somewhere much older than that. And they run until something sees them clearly enough to interrupt them. And here's the second line I want to read because this one's going to sound familiar. Ever feel like you're stuck in the same drama? Same partner, different face. Same job, different title. That's not bad luck. That's pattern memory. A fractal of belief looping until interrupted. And until you see the pattern, you're not choosing. You're reacting. You're reliving. But the moment you become aware, truly aware, you take the director's chair. You reclaim authorship. A fractal of belief looping until interrupted. That's the 95%. That's the house in the dream. That's all of it. The same loop wearing different clothing until something in you wakes up enough to see it for what it is. Now, here's where most people get stuck. We think if we just think hard enough about what we want, set the intention clearly enough, say the affirmation enough times, something will shift. And it doesn't. Not at the level where the pattern actually lives. Because thoughts alone are not the signal. The way it actually works is this. The thought is the blueprint. It designs the idea. The emotion is the voltage. It powers the idea. And the frequency is the broadcast. It sends the idea out into the field. And the field responds to the broadcast, not the blueprint. So if your thought says, I want to finish this, and your emotional baseline is broadcasting, I'm someone who doesn't complete things because completed things get judged. The field hears the broadcast every single time, not the thought sitting on top of it. That's why chapter 1 gives us 3 keys as a way of understanding what's actually available to us right now. So the first key is awareness, and awareness actually means it's not thinking more or analyzing more. It's the moment you catch the pattern before it runs the scene. The closer you can get to actually catching the pattern in the moment, the more powerful it becomes. So really the real target is the moment you become the one watching the pattern instead of the one inside it running it. Right? That's what happened in the dream. I didn't get stronger. Right? I became aware, and that was enough. So the second key is frequency. Everything you think sends a signal. Everything you feel amplifies it. Everything you believe locks it in. So let's make that real. So say you want to build something, start a new business, and a new creative project, a new income stream. Your thought is, I'm going to make this work. That's the signal going out. But beneath that thought, your body is running a familiar feeling, a low-grade anxiety, a quiet voice that says things like, this doesn't work out for me, or who am I to think I can pull this off? That feeling existed long before the thought, and it's been in your system a lot longer. And then underneath that feeling is the belief, the one you probably didn't choose consciously. Something like success isn't safe, or I'm not the kind of person that things come to easily. Right? Your thought says yes, your feeling says maybe, and your belief says no. That's a scrambled signal. And the field responds to the whole broadcast, not just the part you consciously chose. Now, when those 3 things are aligned, when what you think, what you feel, and what you believe are all saying the same thing, that's when things start to move in a way that feels almost effortless. Not because the universe suddenly decided to cooperate, because the signal finally got clear enough to be heard. When they're not, you get the same results wearing different faces. And the third key is language. And this one people underestimate. The words you use aren't just describing your reality, they're instructing it. So every sentence you speak is either reinforcing the old frequency or beginning a new one. That's not positive thinking. Look at it as signal management. So here's what I want you to do this week, before episode 2. 3 honest questions straight from the chapter, not quick answers. Sit with them. What am I consistently thinking about this week? What emotion am I most familiar with in my body right now? And what do I actually believe is possible for me? If those 3 aren't saying the same thing, that's not a problem. That's the information. That's exactly where the work starts. Even a small shift in frequency can redirect the dream. Right? I've lived it enough times to know it's true. So drop what comes up in the comments genuinely, because that's the conversation this whole series is built around. And if enough of you are sitting with the same question around how these patterns form in the first place, that becomes its own conversation. We'll go there together, and I'll see you in episode